Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Not That Simple. Great to have you on board for another high-level conversation. Today's topic is innovation, and our star guest is Niron Hashai. He's an Israeli business scholar. He's currently professor of strategy and international business and the dean of the Arizon School of Business at the Reichman University in Tel Aviv. Hashai has done a lot of work in the areas of multinational corporations, innovation, diversification, and his work has been published in a variety of top management and business journals. He has also worked with international universities around the world, such as the Stern School of Business, NYU, Oxford University, and the Alliance Manchester Business School as well. Niron, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Let's start off with the simple question. Please tell us, according to you, how you would define innovation in your area of work.
So for me, innovation is something that either adds value to the products or services that the company is producing. And when I say adds value, it means that customers are willing to pay more for the product or service because of something that is embedded in them. It can also be something that cuts or reduces the costs of these companies by making them more efficient. And I think in this space where innovation can either lead customers to pay more for the company's products or services, or reduce the company's cost base, there lies the true value of innovation. And this is essentially what companies should be having in mind when they are thinking about being more innovative. It shouldn't be innovation for the sake of innovation.
Okay, so I would like you to give us maybe some good examples of companies that have been able to innovate, and maybe some not so good examples of companies that haven't been able to innovate and therefore paid the price, so to speak, in the market.
Yeah, so we have so many cases throughout history. Maybe a classic example. All of us use the smartphone. So Apple was very good, or Steve Jobs in 2007 introducing the iPhone. This was something that was not so clear in the beginning, but now it's clear to everyone that it created so much utility. We cannot imagine our life without this device.
True.
It's everything. And Google followed them shortly after with the Android operating system. In contrast, companies like Nokia or BlackBerry RIM sort of thought of it as something that customers will not really value, will not really be willing to pay for. And, I remember the funny headline in the newspaper in 2011 or something when BlackBerry RIM came with their first smartphone. Nice of you to remember. So, and they're out of the market, and I think this is a classic example.
It's funny when you talk about BlackBerry, because I think I still miss it sometimes, because to speed the text, sometimes it was still great to have those little keys. But anyway, I think so much of the process of innovation has to do with the culture of a company and the culture of maybe also the country it's in. Do you agree? How would you assess that?
Absolutely agree. And I come from Israel. Israel is well known as the startup nation. And in that respect, I think many of our cultural or national cultural traits translate into cultural traits that organizationally contribute to innovation, and for companies being more able than others to produce innovative products and services. I can give you a few examples of such cultural traits. So one thing, and very, very true in Israel, disobey your superiors. Like, hierarchy is not the most important thing. Why is that important? Because if you as a manager are willing to accept the fact that your subordinates are telling you that you are wrong, we should think of it from another angle, there is maybe another thing to consider, etc. This debate actually breeds a lot of discussion and sort of fertilizes the innovation. So this is one thing. The other thing is understanding that failure is part of the learning process. Let me repeat this sentence because I think it's critical. Failure is part of the learning process, and it's okay to fail. This encourages companies and individuals within companies to take risk. And without risk-taking, you won't be able to innovate. In some cultures, like, the Japanese, they commit harakiri if they fail. And other cultures, it's really, you are ashamed of being, of failing. In many Israeli companies that are one of the most innovative one, it's okay to try something and, fail in it. We have so many entrepreneurs putting in their CVs, I've been in this startup, closed, this startup, closed, this, and then, they succeed because they have been there and they took risk. I have one third thing that I want to add in that respect. Being able to correctly combine individualism, meaning taking proactive action, etc., but also collectivism, meaning learn how to collaborate with your team members, because always the team's combined efforts are stronger from the single contribution of each and every one of us.
Yeah, it's interesting. You were talking about that, and I remember speaking with a friend of mine who was working in a startup, and the boss, the CEO, would say, if you're going to screw up cheap, but don't be afraid of screwing up, right? Because that's part of the whole process. And I think accountability sometimes as well is a cultural value that sometimes is heavier in some cultures. And I think in Latin cultures, from my experience, sometimes people have a problem with taking accountability when something goes wrong, and you lose opportunities to innovate because people are scared of taking that risk, right?
Absolutely, I agree. It's taking risks, but also being accountable. It failed because I did not consider X, Y, Z.
Yeah. And
that's okay. I'm willing to continue and maybe fix my mistake, maybe go elsewhere. It is something that, I can think of many national cultures. You are right about Latin America. Also, I think in Asia, some of Central Europe cultures, where it's very, very difficult to let go, to understand that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. The reward will come at some point.
Yeah, I noticed that here. I mean, Portugal, Spain, France, Latin European countries as well. I had an opportunity to live and work in the States, live and work in the UK, in Switzerland. And in these environments, I saw there was more of an openness to go for it, even if it don't get the 100% that you're looking for, rather than wait for someone to, make a last minute decision that then ends up being a reactive decision rather than a proactive decision. So tell us about this culture of innovation and how you feel it can allow companies to be, and I guess here is agile as a word, even though they're big companies sometimes, which you mentioned Apple, you mentioned Google, these are huge companies. And I mean, we could use the AI example now for a new product and a new wave where companies also were trying to adjust, right? So even these big companies. So what does that successful culture of innovation look like, regardless of the size of the company?
It mainly gives the individual the space to take initiative on the one hand, but on the other, also be able to leverage on the corporate resources, be it financial resources or human capital, to come up with new innovations. So I'll give you a few examples. So for instance, Google give their employees 1 day a week, so 1 out of 5 days, where they can work on any project they'd like to work. And they can do basically whatever they'd like on this day.
Okay.
And if this idea will be conceived as successful, as profitable, etc., Google will go with this individual and maybe open a spin-off, a subsidiary, something, and he or she can manage this. Mm-hmm. So some of Google's products, like Gmail, came up from something like that. By the way, this way of fostering innovation is not Google's idea. There is a company that I assume all of us know, 3M, stick it, post it, we know. So they have more than 60,000 products, and they use this strategy for many, many years now. Microsoft, on the other hand, for example, are doing something else. In Microsoft, not only they are encouraging, startups to come to accelerators within Microsoft, which is their way to tap into, the wisdom of entrepreneurs, etc. But they also encourage employees to come up with startup initiatives and to shop within the corporation on a division, a unit, something that will want to sponsor their ideas. And in that way, they kind of fertilize within corporation entrepreneurship, what we call intrapreneurship, which in my view is as important, at least maybe sometimes more important than entrepreneurship. Mm.
What about diversification? Because I know obviously that's another area of expertise, and we've seen so many, and I'm thinking about retail companies many times being able to diversify, where they're selling t-shirts, then they're selling perfume, then they're selling watches, then they're selling. So what are some examples that you have seen within the business, and I mean retail business maybe, or multinational companies that have diversified in a proactive and successful way?
So actually, first I want to bring in international diversification in that respect, because many of the large corporations diversify internationally, understanding that there are centers of excellence or knowledge reservoirs that are very, very different between countries. I think only in Israel there are more than 500 research and development units of multinational corporations. Okay. And why are they coming here? Some of these companies are very innovative. Google is innovative enough without having Israel, and so is Microsoft and Intel and Samsung, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they understand there is some kind of different knowledge created in Israel. For instance, because of the special geopolitical situation in Israel, we are strong in cyber, we are strong in homeland security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this brings different types of knowledge into the corporation, which can be used elsewhere. So this is one thing. I will give you another example. For instance, Intel, which used to be leading in semiconductor production, sort of lost dominance in the last few years for many reasons. One of them is, not anticipating the mobile revolution and the fact that many of the chips we are buying, the processors, will be for mobile phones. They are trying to compensate for that. For instance, they have diversified into autonomous cars. They have acquired a company called Mobileye, which is a leading company in terms of, driver assistant technologies, which at its peak, it will be autonomous driving. This is Intel's way, through diversification, to come up with new growth engines that help it become more innovative. Google now is not only the search engine that we know. Google has now, also activity in autonomous cars. They have Verily, which is about digital health. They have activity that relates to, smart houses, smart cities. So in many, many aspects, you go to different business areas where your knowledge first can be exploited a bit differently, but still it has to be somehow, this is an important thing. If you do t-shirts and you go to, AI, probably the relationship will be quite loose. You need to create some connection, some relatedness between your areas, and this will help you combine pieces of knowledge from different businesses to become overall more innovative and to span growth engines.
I wanted to ask your opinion on the processes and the structure of companies which are normally successful at innovation. I mean, what do they look like? Because traditionally, when it comes to a board or a board supporting a CEO, we know that especially with companies that have been successful for a long time, there are a lot of political influences from members of the board, obviously, that can make the process of innovation harder to reach, let's say. From your example, if I were going to come to you as a CEO of a long-standing traditional family business that has been successful, but needs to innovate, what kind of advice would you give me on the processes, on the structure that I need maybe to reformulate or recreate in order to allow that innovation to happen and not be filtered too much by the political interests that there could be around me?
Yeah. So to large extent is embracing the corporate culture that I mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
Embrace a corporate culture of risk-taking. Embrace a culture where debate and discussions, open discussions between top-level managers and, programmers, etc., are something that are welcome. Embrace group work. Embrace individual activity. Increase diversity. Like, this is something extremely important because we know that diversity, which can be achieved through international diversification, but it can be achieved through having more women in the company, people from different origin, et cetera, et cetera. Diversity breeds innovation. We know it. Create shortcut mechanisms. Let me give you an example. So, for instance, in Nike, they encourage employees to group, informally. So it can be me, an engineer from one division, joining forces with some marketing people from another division, and I don't know, some technician from another place. And we come up with an initiative, and they have this channel that allows you to go directly to the top management with their initiatives. Of course, not every initiative will be accepted, but the fact that you have this channel, which, cross-cuts all the levels of hierarchy, and I have several research studies that show that hierarchy has advantages, but it can also, suppress innovation because you need to go through the levels of bureaucracy, and it starts with a good idea and somebody kills it in the middle. But these shortcuts, for instance, are something that are really helping Nike to come up every time with some great idea.
Yeah, we've talked about what needs to happen in order for innovation to have an opportunity of being implemented in the structure of a company and what some of those success paths are. When do you think is there a danger for there to be innovation just for innovation's sake and just moving on from products or processes that have been successful too early?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think one of the main challenges of companies is to know how to manage different technological generations, different technological innovations. You can't do it too slowly because then some of your partners will bypass you. You can't do it too quickly because, if the whole purpose of innovation is to create more value in the sense of either increasing the utility to customers, to paying customers, or decreasing your costs. You don't, once you created something like that, you don't want to destroy it. So this can happen. I don't have a recipe book for that, but companies should be, for instance, cautious not to disperse R&D activity too thin, or not to allow autonomy too much, because then at the end of the day, you are limited in your financial resources, you are limited in your human resources. Once you cut when you start to separate your efforts towards many directions, you can become defocused. I gave you the example of 3M earlier on. Yeah. At some point at 3M, they have decentralized research and development operations, and they discovered that we are really decentralizing it too much. Let's try to do something that is more integrated, that we can control it from all. So, at the end of the day, I always say that management is the most complex profession because we don't have a recipe or a code book to give managers, but these should be the considerations. How are we encouraging our employees to take risks? Because it's important, but of course it cannot be taking more and more and nonsensible risk because at some point, failing too much will lead the company to close.
Of course.
And it's a question of really finding the golden way to win these things that really translate into something that is conductive.
And obviously, because of your work and because of your position, you're obviously exposed to a lot of trends when it comes to innovation. And when you travel and collaborate with some of the international universities that you work with, what are some of the trends that you're observing now, and what's some of the content that you're sharing with students around the world that you think it would be valuable to share with us?
So I think to a large extent, it is the ability to think differently from a current mainstream, but not going too far from something that is happening. So what we need to see now a whole discussion about AI and how it's going to change the whole human race and all this stuff. And clearly, AI is something that we can use, and there is lots of room for innovation, etc. And what I would encourage my students in that respect, for instance, is okay. It is a tool. We have seen tools before. It has its pros and cons. Let's use it in a sensible way that will allow you to build on what you know and make it something that makes you better. But don't use it in a way that is completely opposite to what you've done up till now. Forget everything that you did. This will help you make something that is meaningful out of it. In many respects, everything that, I would call it related diversification, related innovation, something that can build on past knowledge but change it somehow, is probably more promising than going into any radical change. In our literature, for instance, we have this distinction between exploitation, meaning incremental improvements, and exploration, meaning coming up with something that is brand new. And what we always teach and encourage managers is to choose ambidexterity. What is ambidexterity? Try to combine both. You have to have some really radical project, that's good, but also have these incremental innovation projects that will help you. Don't go, if you do only incremental, you probably will fail and stay behind. If you do only radical, it's too risky. Now try to combine them. You can combine them over time, sometimes do this, sometimes do that. You can combine them in your portfolio. You mentioned diversification. Some really, really innovative projects, some incrementally innovative, but try to keep the balance.
Finally, how can companies measure the success of their innovation efforts? What kind of metrics should be put in place to evaluate the value of what has been created?
At the end of the day, we need to distinguish between short-term and long-term metrics. So short-term would probably be, and then it depends, patent application can be a good measure, new product introduction. But this is kind of a short-term that allows you to see what a company innovation looks like. But I think for a longer term, it would be much more interesting to look sales growth, on profitability of specific products that are based on innovation. So first, as I said earlier, it shouldn't never be innovation for the sake of innovation, but there are things that we can look at in the short term. We cannot expect new product to be profitable from day one. But if we see that we are increasing our pipeline of products, probably this is a good sign. Something will happen. And then after a while, we also want to start seeing profits that are generating. Again, everything boils down to this. I'm creating a difference between the utility that my products and services create and my costs, which allow me to be profitable. I cannot create utility but being very, very costly, or if I'm efficient when creating low utility, this will not be good. So we should combine the two.
Gotcha. Okay, so we're going to wrap up this conversation with a series of 4 quick-fire questions, okay, that we ask all our guests. Yeah, it's a surprise. What I would like is for you to answer in one word or in one sentence, okay? So, and they're general, so I'm not going to ask you any, difficult history questions here or anything like that. The first one is, what is one personality trait that a good leader could really benefit from having, and why?
Willing to accept criticism.
Okay.
And why? Because if you are open to that, you will become a better manager. And if you are not allowing this environment to be there, you will be very lonely at the top, making your own mistakes until you fall.
What is the biggest challenge, in your opinion, that humanity is facing today?
Global warming.
Yeah, that is quite a popular answer, and it's easy to see why. If you could change one thing in the world today by magic, what would that be? What would you change?
So my second answer to global warming was the fact that I think the social networks are really making us polarized. If I could change something, is making us less polarized. You see in so many countries crazy polarization where folks are sunk into their echo chambers, believing that everybody thinks like them, and this is really threatening democracy. I have a friend who told me once that democracies won't survive social networks. Well, sometimes I think he's right.
That was a lot longer than one word, but I'm glad you gave that longer answer, because it's such an important point. I mean, it's kind of a topic for a different show, really. But it is because it's crazy what's happening now, and how little people are exposed to differing opinions, and how opinions are also more important than facts these days, which is so dangerous. Last question, what is the most important learning of your life and career?
Wow.
What's the most important thing you've learned?
Always know that you don't know enough about something. As much as you think that you're an expert, there is always something you can learn more, improve, be better. So that's, I think, out of my mentality always. Yeah, I know a lot about many things, which I research, etc. But I have more to learn.
I understand. Niron, thank you so much for joining us on our show. It's Not That Simple, and for adding so much insight and expertise into this topic of innovation. And I think it's really been valuable content for anyone who's been in a management position, who's been in a structure where decisions are made. I certainly find it valuable as a business owner myself. So thanks a lot for that, and continued success.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. It was great to speak with Niron Hashai over the last half an hour or so, and we really hope you enjoyed the latest episode of It's Not That Simple. See you soon.